My fiancé wanted me to quit my job to be a stay-at-home wife, so I added one line to the prenup that changed everything. Garrett presented it like a romantic gesture. "I want to take care of you," he said, sliding the thick legal document across our kitchen table. "You won't need to work anymore once we're married." I'd been a software engineer for 6 years, working my way up at a tech startup. My salary was actually higher than his, though he conveniently forgot that detail whenever he talked about providing for us. The prenup was 47 pages long. Garrett's lawyer had crafted it to protect his family's real estate empire while leaving me with virtually nothing if we divorced. I'd get a small monthly allowance as long as I remained a devoted wife and homemaker. "This seems one-sided," I said, flipping through the clauses. "That's how prenups work," Garrett replied. "My family's wealth needs protection." What he didn't know was that I'd been documenting everything for months. The way he'd started criticizing my career obsession, how he'd conveniently schedule romantic dinners during my important work presentations, the passive-aggressive comments about women who put ambition before family. I took the prenup to my own lawyer, a brilliant woman named Hadley, who specialized in protecting women's assets. "This is medieval," she said after reviewing it. "He's essentially asking you to sign away your financial independence. Can we add a clause?" I asked. Hadley smiled. "What did you have in mind?" 2 weeks later, I returned the modified prenup to Garrett. He barely glanced at the changes, too focused on the wedding planning and guest list for his family's political connections. "Perfect," he said, signing with a flourish. "My parents will be so relieved." The added clause was buried on page 34, written in the same dense legal language as everything else. In the event that either party requests the other to cease professional employment, the requesting party agrees to provide financial compensation equal to the projected lifetime earnings of the affected career, calculated at current market rates with annual increases adjusted for inflation and industry growth. My projected lifetime earnings as a software engineer, $3.2 million. We married in October. The reception was everything Garrett's mother had dreamed of. 200 guests, ice sculptures, and enough flowers to stock a funeral home. 3 months later, Garrett started the pressure campaign. "Darling, it's time to submit your resignation," he announced over breakfast. "My mother's expecting grandchildren soon, and my career is really taking off." I smiled sweetly. "Of course, I'll need the check first, though." "What check?" I pulled out my copy of the prenup, highlighted section on page 34. His face went through several emotions as he read. "This is ridiculous," he sputtered. "You can't be serious." "Your family's lawyer wrote it," I said. "You signed it." Garrett called his father immediately. Within hours, their legal team was reviewing the document. The clause was ironclad. Garrett's signature made it legally binding. "We could fight this in court," their lawyer admitted during an emergency family meeting. "But it would be expensive, public, and unlikely to succeed." Garrett's mother nearly fainted when she learned the amount. $3 million? She gasped. "For what?" "For her projected lifetime earnings," the lawyer explained. "It's actually quite reasonable based on industry standards." Garrett tried everything. Guilt trips about family expectations, threats about our marriage not working out, bribes involving vacation homes and jewelry. I remained unmoved. "You wanted me to quit," I said. "The price is right there in black and white." 6 months later, I was promoted to senior engineer with a substantial raise. Garrett stopped mentioning my resignation. His family's dinner conversations shifted to other topics. Last week, his cousin's wife asked how I managed to keep working after marriage. "Simple," I said, raising my wine glass. "I read the fine print." Garrett's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Sometimes the best protection is buried in plain sight, but that wasn't the end of the story. The real war began 2 months later when I discovered I was pregnant. I'd suspected for weeks, the exhaustion, the morning sickness that felt more like all-day nausea. When the test showed 2 pink lines, I stared at it for 10 minutes, my mind racing through implications. Garrett was ecstatic when I told him that evening. "This is perfect timing," he said, pulling me into a hug that felt more possessive than loving. "Now you have the perfect reason to stay home." "We haven't discussed that," I said carefully. His smile faltered. "What's to discuss? You're having a baby." "My baby. Our family needs you at home, and our family needs my income." "Not anymore." I got the promotion. He'd been waiting to spring this on me. VP of Development, base salary of $200,000 plus bonuses. I did the math quickly. Still less than my current compensation package, but he was right. We could survive on his income alone. That's wonderful news, I said. Congratulations. So, you'll quit? I kissed his cheek. For $3.2 million. His face went dark. You're pregnant with my child and you're still playing these games. I'm protecting our child's future, I replied. That money could fund their entire college education. Over the next few weeks, the pressure intensified. Garrett's mother started sending articles about the importance of maternal bonding. His father scheduled a lunch to discuss family priorities. Even Garrett's sister, who'd been a successful marketing executive before her own pregnancy, called to share how fulfilling motherhood was. I never realized what I was missing, she said during our coffee date. Work feels so trivial now compared to raising the next generation. How's the company doing without you? I asked. Her smile tightened. They're managing, and your stock options, the ones that were supposed to vest next year. Some things are more important than money. I nodded sympathetically, but I'd done my research. The company had been acquired 6 months after she left. Her unvested stock options would have been worth $1.4 million. At my 12-week appointment, Dr. Martinez delivered perfect news. The baby was healthy and developing normally. Garrett squeezed my hand as we looked at the ultrasound screen. When will you need to stop working? He asked the doctor. That varies by individual and profession, Dr. Martinez replied. Many women work until they deliver. Since you're in tech, you could likely work from home indefinitely if needed. Garrett's grip on my hand tightened uncomfortably. That night, he tried a new approach. I've been thinking, he said over dinner. What if we compromise? You could freelance from home after the baby comes. Part-time consulting work. Freelancing doesn't offer health insurance or retirement benefits, I pointed out. Plus, it would be impossible to match my current earnings potential. Money isn't everything, says the man whose family made their fortune through strategic financial planning. He set down his fork. Why are you being so stubborn about this? Why are you being so controlling? We stared at each other across the table, the question hanging between us like a challenge. The breaking point came at his family's monthly dinner. I was 19 weeks pregnant, just starting to show, when his aunt brought up a funny story about her neighbor. She worked throughout both pregnancies, the aunt said with a laugh. Poor kids spent more time with nannies than their own mother. The eldest is in therapy now. How sad, Garrett's mother added pointedly. Children need their mothers, especially in those crucial early years. I smiled politely and excused myself to the bathroom. When I returned, I heard Garrett's voice from the kitchen. She's being completely unreasonable. I've tried everything. Sometimes women need to be guided toward the right decision, his father's voice responded. Your grandfather knew how to handle these situations. What do you mean? Make the choice for her. Create circumstances where staying home becomes the only viable option. My blood went cold. I can't just fire her, Garrett said. Of course not, but there are other ways. Her company depends on several contracts, doesn't it? Contracts that could become complicated. I pressed myself against the wall, recording every word on my phone. Dad, I don't know. Son, sometimes leadership requires difficult decisions. Your wife is prioritizing her ego over your family's well-being. That's not acceptable. The next morning, I called Hadley. They're planning to sabotage my career, I explained, playing the recording. Hadley listened in silence, then swore under her breath. This is conspiracy and possibly extortion, she said, but proving it would be challenging. Do you have evidence of any actual interference? Not yet, but I want to be prepared. Smart. I'll draft some protective documents. In the meantime, document everything. For the next month, I watched and waited. Garrett's behavior shifted subtly. He became more attentive, more supportive of my work. He stopped mentioning resignation entirely. Too subtle, too convenient. The first sign came when our biggest client, Henderson Corp., requested an emergency meeting about project restructuring. I'd managed their account for 3 years without a single complaint. We're concerned about consistency moving forward, their CEO explained during the video call. Given your upcoming situation, my pregnancy doesn't affect my work quality, I replied professionally. Of course not. But we understand things can become unpredictable. We're exploring options that might be more stable. After the call, I immediately checked our client database. Henderson Corp's primary holding company was owned by a subsidiary of Garrett's father's investment firm. That evening, I said nothing to Garrett about the meeting. Instead, I watched him carefully during dinner. "How was work today?" he asked, cutting his steak with precise movements. "Productive. The Henderson project is moving along smoothly." His hand paused for just a fraction of a second. "Good to hear." The second incident happened a week later. Our startup's largest investor requested a review of all current projects, specifically questioning the viability of our long-term contracts. "We need assurance that key personnel will be available for the duration of these commitments," the investor stated during the board meeting. I sat quietly as my boss fumbled through explanations about maternity leave policies and project management continuity. After the meeting, I pulled up the investor's corporate structure. 3 degrees of separation led back to Garrett's family's investment portfolio. That night, I lay awake next to my husband, my hand resting on my growing belly, wondering how many other traps were being laid. The answer came sooner than expected. 2 weeks later, my boss called an emergency meeting. "I'm sorry," he said, his face genuinely distressed. "We're losing 3 major contracts. The board is demanding budget cuts." "You're firing me." "It's not performance-based. Your work is impeccable, but with the pregnancy and the revenue loss." "When do these contract cancellations take effect?" He checked his notes. "Henderson pulls out next month. Meridian Industries ends their agreement in 6 weeks. And Blackstone Development is requesting a project review that could lead to termination." All 3 companies had connections to Garrett's family network. "I understand," I said calmly. "When's my last day?" "End of the month. We're offering a generous severance package." That evening, Garrett came home with flowers and champagne. "I heard about work," he said, his face arranged in sympathetic lines. "I'm so sorry, darling, but maybe this is a blessing in disguise." "How so?" "Now you can focus on the baby. No more stress about deadlines or difficult clients." I accepted his hug while my mind calculated timing and evidence. "You're right," I said softly. "This might be exactly what we need." His relief was palpable. The next morning, I called Hadley. "They did it," I said. "I can prove the connections between the companies and his family's investment interests." "That's tortious interference with contract and possibly conspiracy," she said. "But the real question is what you want to do about it." "I want to file for divorce." Silence stretched across the line. "Are you certain?" "With the baby coming, especially with the baby coming, I won't raise a child with a man who destroys my career to control me." "All right, but there's a problem. The prenup includes a morality clause that could complicate things. I'd forgotten about that buried provision on page 23. Either party could be held responsible for actions that brought public shame or financial harm to the family." "His actions caused me to lose my job," I pointed out. "True, but he could argue you're abandoning the marriage during pregnancy, which might trigger the clause." "So I'm trapped." "Not necessarily. There's another option." Hadley's plan was audacious. Instead of filing for divorce immediately, we would force Garrett to request my resignation formally, creating legal documentation of his interference. Then, when he inevitably refused to pay the $3.2 million compensation, I could file for breach of contract and divorce simultaneously, using his financial manipulation as grounds. "It's risky," she warned. "If he calls your bluff and actually writes the check, you'd have to decide whether to stay married to a man who bought your silence." "He won't write the check," I said with certainty. "His ego won't allow it." The trap was set. That weekend, I initiated the conversation over breakfast. "I've been thinking about the job situation," I said, buttering my toast with deliberate casualness. "Maybe you're right. Maybe this is the perfect time to focus on family." Garrett's face lit up. "Really? I'd like to submit my resignation letter this week. Make it official. That's wonderful news." He reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "My parents will be thrilled. Of course, I'll need you to make the request formally for my records." His smile faltered slightly. "What do you mean?" "The prenup requires written documentation if either party requests career termination. Just a formality." I could see him weighing options. The convenience of having me quit versus the legal implications of putting his request in writing. Convenience won. That Tuesday, Garrett presented me with a typed letter on his personal letterhead. I, Garrett Holbrook, formally request that my wife cease her professional employment to focus on family responsibilities and the care of our expected child. This request is made in the best interest of our family unit and our child's welfare. He'd signed it with a flourish, probably thinking he was finally getting what he wanted. I smiled sweetly and tucked the letter into my purse. I'll submit my resignation tomorrow, but I didn't submit any resignation. Instead, I took the letter straight to Hadley. Perfect, she said, making copies. Now, we wait for him to ask about the compensation. The wait was shorter than expected. Thursday morning, Garrett brought coffee to my bedside, an unusual gesture that immediately put me on alert. Darling, I've been thinking about our financial planning, he began carefully. With the baby coming and your transition to homemaker, we should probably restructure our accounts. What kind of restructuring? Joint accounts, shared budgeting, that sort of thing. More traditional family management. And the compensation payment. His hand stilled on the coffee mug handle. What compensation payment? I sat up in bed, pulling the covers around my growing belly. The $3.2 million for my lifetime earnings. It's outlined in page 34 of our prenup. That was just legal language. Standard prenup terminology. You signed it, Garrett. Your letter requesting my resignation triggers the compensation clause. His face cycled through confusion, anger, and calculation. Nobody actually expects those provisions to be enforced, he said finally. I do. Be reasonable. That's an enormous amount of money. It's exactly equal to what I would have earned over my career. The career you asked me to abandon for our family. Then our family can afford to compensate me for the sacrifice. That evening, Garrett called an emergency family meeting. I sat quietly while he explained the situation to his parents and their lawyer. This is extortion, his mother declared. It's a legal contract, I replied calmly. Your family's lawyer wrote the terms. The lawyer, a distinguished man in his 70s, reviewed the prenup with obvious discomfort. The clause is legally binding, he admitted reluctantly. It was included at Mr. Holbrook Sr.'s insistence to prevent any future claims of coercion regarding career decisions. The irony was delicious, but surely no reasonable person would enforce such an extreme provision, Garrett's father argued. Your son made the request in writing, I said, producing the letter. The enforcement isn't up to me. It's automatic per the contract terms. What followed was 2 hours of threats, bribes, and emotional manipulation. They offered jewelry, cars, vacation homes, everything except what the contract actually specified. Finally, Garrett's father played his trump card. If you pursue this, I'll make sure you never work in tech again. My influence extends throughout the industry, like you already did with my previous job. The silence was deafening. I have recordings of your conversation about sabotaging my career, I continued, along with documented evidence of the connections between Henderson Corp., Meridian Industries, and your investment portfolio. The lawyer's face had gone pale. Those could constitute criminal conspiracy charges, he said quietly. Garrett's father leaned back in his chair, reassessing the situation. What do you want? He asked bluntly. I want the $3.2 million compensation as specified in the contract your family lawyer wrote and your son signed. And if we pay it, then I'll honor the contract and become a stay-at-home wife. And if we don't, I smiled, then I'll file for divorce, citing financial manipulation and conspiracy, seek full custody based on your demonstrated willingness to undermine our family's financial stability, and pursue criminal charges for interfering with my employment. The room fell silent, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. After what felt like an eternity, Garrett's father nodded curtly. We'll need time to liquidate assets. Of course, I understand these things take time. 30 days. Perfect. As we prepared to leave, Garrett grabbed my arm in the hallway. How long have you been planning this? He asked, his voice barely controlled. Since the moment you slid that prenup across our kitchen table. You manipulated me. I protected myself. There's a difference. The next month was the strangest of my life. Garrett and I maintained the facade of a normal marriage while lawyers and accountants worked behind the scenes to structure the payment. He tried periodically to convince me to accept alternative arrangements, trust funds, real estate investments, anything except liquid cash that would give me true financial independence. I declined every offer. During my monthly OB appointment, Dr. Martinez noticed my elevated stress levels. Everything okay at home? She asked gently. Just some financial planning discussions, I replied. Money stress can affect pregnancy outcomes. Have you considered counseling? I almost laughed. What kind of counseling addresses a situation where your husband's family orchestrated your job loss to control your life choices? We're working through it, I said instead. The payment came through on a Tuesday morning in late March. I was 28 weeks pregnant, my belly round and prominent, when Hadley called to confirm the wire transfer. It's done, she said. $3.2 million minus taxes is now in your personal account. I hung up and placed my hand on my stomach, feeling the baby's strong kicks. We did it, I whispered. That evening, Garrett arrived home with a bottle of sparkling cider and a forced smile. So, he said, popping the cork, ready to start your new life as a lady of leisure? I accepted the glass but didn't drink. Actually, I've decided to continue working. His smile froze. What? I'm starting my own consulting firm. With the compensation money as seed capital, I can build something substantial. But you agreed. I agreed to quit my job if you paid the compensation. You paid. I quit. The prenup doesn't specify what I can do afterward. Garrett set down his glass with deliberate control. You're telling me I paid $3.2 million for nothing. You paid $3.2 million to learn that I'm not for sale. You can't be serious. Dead serious. I've already signed lease papers for office space. 3 other senior engineers are joining me. We start next month. The fury in his eyes was frightening, but I felt oddly calm. My father warned me about women like you, he said quietly. What kind of women? The kind who pretend to love you while planning to destroy you. I stood up, my hand resting on my belly. Garrett, I did love you, but love doesn't mean accepting manipulation and control. You made your choice when you decided to sabotage my career. I was protecting our family. You were protecting your ego. He started toward me, then stopped himself. This isn't over, he said. Yes, it is. I walked upstairs and began packing. The divorce papers were filed the next morning. Hadley had spent weeks preparing the documentation, evidence of the conspiracy to interfere with my employment, recordings of family meetings discussing manipulation strategies, and financial records proving the connections between canceled contracts and Garrett's family investments. Garrett's response was swift and vicious. He filed counterclaims, alleging fraud, emotional manipulation, and abandonment. His family hired the most expensive legal team in the state. The custody battle was brutal. They argued I was an unfit mother who prioritized money over family stability. They presented evidence of my scheming and deceptive behavior regarding the prenup. They brought in psychological experts who testified about the trauma of maternal separation. I countered with evidence of their systematic campaign to destroy my financial independence, phone recordings of conspiracy discussions, financial records proving deliberate interference with my employment, documentation of their attempts to isolate and control me. The judge, a woman in her 60s who'd practiced family law for 30 years, listened to 6 weeks of testimony before delivering her ruling. This case represents one of the most calculated attempts at financial coercion I've encountered in 3 decades on the bench, she said. The defendant's family engaged in systematic efforts to undermine the plaintiff's career and financial independence through deception and manipulation. She awarded me full custody with supervised visitation for Garrett until he completed anger management counseling. Furthermore, she continued, the prenuptial agreement's compensation clause will remain enforceable as it represents the only protection available to the plaintiff against the defendant's proven willingness to interfere with her career. Garrett's family appealed, of course. The case dragged through higher courts for another 18 months while I built my consulting firm and raised my daughter alone. Elena was born in May, a healthy, beautiful baby with Garrett's dark hair and what I hoped were my stubborn genes. Garrett was allowed brief supervised visits, during which he alternated between desperate attempts to reconcile and cold threats about future legal action. The appeals court ultimately upheld the custody ruling and added language strengthening the prenup's enforceability. Garrett's pattern of financial manipulation, they ruled, created compelling state interest in protecting my right to economic independence. By Elena's first birthday, my consulting firm was thriving. We'd landed contracts with several major tech companies. Ironically, some of the same firms that had refused to work with my previous employer after Garrett's family's intervention. The tech industry, it turned out, didn't appreciate manipulation and conspiracy any more than I did. Garrett remarried 2 years later, a woman 15 years younger who worked as a receptionist at his father's firm. She quit her job 3 months after their wedding. I sent them a card congratulating them on their traditional family arrangement. Last month, at Elena's 5th birthday party, she asked why Daddy didn't live with us. Daddy and I have different ideas about how families should work, I explained. He thinks mommies should stay home and take care of children all day. I think mommies can take care of children and have careers too. Which way is right? She asked, chocolate cake smeared on her cheek. Both ways can be right, depending on what the family wants, but the most important thing is that everyone gets to choose for themselves. She nodded solemnly, then ran off to play with her friends. That evening, as I tucked her into bed, Elena looked up at me with serious brown eyes. "Mommy, when I grow up, can I be a consultant like you?" "You can be anything you want to be," I said, kissing her forehead. "As long as you always read the fine print." Today, my consulting firm employs 47 people. We specialize in helping companies navigate complex contractual relationships and avoid the kind of systematic manipulation that destroyed my first career. I still get periodic legal threats from Garrett's family. They've challenged the prenup's enforceability 3 more times unsuccessfully. The compensation money, invested wisely, has grown to over $5 million, more than enough to fund Elena's education and secure her future independence. Hadley recently retired, but not before helping me establish a legal foundation that provides free contract review services for women in professional relationships. We call it the Fine Print Project. The irony isn't lost on me. Garrett's attempt to control me through financial manipulation ultimately created both my independence and a tool to help other women avoid similar traps. Elena is now 8 and shows alarming aptitude for both mathematics and contract law. Last week, she negotiated a complex trade agreement with her classmate involving lunch money, Pokémon cards, and playground privileges. When I asked where she learned such sophisticated negotiation tactics, she grinned. "I read the fine print on my allowance contract," she said. "Did you know you promised to pay me extra for A grades, but there's no penalty for B grades? That's a loophole." Sometimes the best protection really is buried in plain sight, and sometimes the best revenge is teaching the next generation to read more carefully than their parents ever did.